Yeah, so this is my origin story, and it was considering that there would be a lot of anxieties and all of that among you. Please do remember I was exactly at this stage 20 odd years ago when I had joined the National Institute of Design as a school leavers program entrant, which is essentially the program that you join after your 12th standard. I grew up in a very small town in Orissa, which is called Raurkela, which had this tradition of every year sending people out to various medical colleges and engineering colleges, and some people went to NDA, some people went to the Merchant Navy, some people went to catering colleges, so on and so forth. So I was a very weird choice when I decided to go to design school. The choice was either architecture or design. Kind of crept in at some point because uh, one of my very close friends went to NID, and he said you would be an extremely good fit. You can draw, you can create three-dimensional models, and I think you'll like the program there. And it just so happened I sat in with this few number of people that were invited for the test. I got through. I landed myself at NID, and while I was making this presentation, I came across this photograph, and it was a great juxtaposition. 1991 versus what we are talking about, and this whole concept of the future. Believe me, when I went to NIT, I had no inkling of what design was, and my mother actually told me that I was throwing my future away by not pursuing a career in medicine. Believe me, I was not cut out for that, even though half my family were doctors. Uh, I wanted to do something which was in the cusp of photography, great copywriting, a bit of National Geographic, and drawing. If you add all of that, somewhere the National Institute of Design came up. Uh, well, I chose to pursue product design. There were 7 in a batch. This is almost my entire batch at NID. Remember those times, batches used to be minuscule. There were just 27 of us, as opposed to I don't know what 80, 100 that go in every year. We were 27. Finally, 24 of us graduated. Uh, and somewhere that's where this entire presentation kind of develops its context. Because even though I studied product design, the future that I came into, I was doing something else entirely. Uh, Continuing on this, I this is part of my origin story. I'll spend some 5-10 minutes here just to give you a context as to what I do and how my thoughts and my design philosophy and my work have been framed. So I joined a senior of mine. We used to design retail fixtures, retail spaces, exhibitions with a little bit of product design through in. Those were the early years of retail, when brands were beginning to form themselves, and the first concepts of organized retail were beginning to develop. Most of these multinational brands were beginning to come into India, and we were seeing this burst of organized retail, and which was a very exciting space for me at that point of time, because I loved space. I loved working in spaces. I I loved that I could bring my product design, manufacturing, creativity into space, and apply them uh, into areas and concepts that were a culmination of a whole lot of let's say expertises, uh, which were, in my opinion, not straight jacketed, but something I really love doing. It wasn't limiting in the sense that I was doing only one thing. I was interacting with graphic designers, with photographers, with electricians, and each day was a new learning. And then I somehow managed, I wouldn't say managed, but I got catapulted through some really freak accident into television sets. It just so happened that one of my seniors used to design sets for, I don't know whether you guys know of him or not, but a lot of seniors if there are any in this group, will remember this gentleman called Siddharth Basu, who used to run television quiz shows on television. And I ended up designing a lot of sets for him. At that point of time, I got drafted into this international reality show called The Amazing Race, which is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the longest running reality shows and a multiple Emmy award winning show on CBS. I was a product. I started out as an art director on the show. I ended up being one of the production designers. I worked on, I think, 17 seasons, right from 2009, if I'm not mistaken. I traveled all across the world in various countries. Uh, it was a great experience. Again, very, very different from what I had originally graduated in my specialization. And while all of this was happening, I was also the creative head for these two very, very unlikely concepts called the Filmfare uh, Awards and the Femina Miss India pageant. Primarily because, not because of the glitz, but because it gave me the opportunity to work uh, on television sets and set design on a very, very large scale. While I was doing this, I also took a sabbatical in 2009, 10, where I joined the MIT Institute of Design as a faculty. I was a visiting faculty from time to time, but then I decided to do that, take a break, go into design education. I started out in the retail and exhibition design there before I started heading it, and I headed retail, exhibition, and the UX department till 2014, which is when I came back and I joined Showbiz, which is now, since the last year, part of the global Havas Media Group. For all those of you who haven't heard of Havas, Havas is the world's third largest media group, besides after WPP and Omnicom. Uh, Among a whole lot of creative companies that are part of the Havas group, like we are, they own the Universal Media Group and Vivendi. In India, they own Think Design, which is a design studio, Langur, which is essentially another digital company, Havas Life Sorrento, which works in medical creativity, and the Conran Design Group, and besides that. So each of these companies give a very different, bring a different expertise into this entire Havas village concept. We are an experiential company, and we design, and I and my team of 18 designers, ranging from graphics to architects to interior designers to 3D visualizers, etc. We create brand experiences across the spectrum. We work with automotive agencies, we work with SMCG clients, we work with banking and finance, we work with a lot of tech companies, ranging from Amazon to VMware to Mercedes-Benz to Renault to you name it. We probably would have worked with them. Tata, uh, Unilever, so on and so forth. So if you notice, uh, my concept of where I'm going to be future has evolved with each experience that I have. And the biggest learning that I have over these 20 odd years that I've been working is to never take design for granted. You never know what comes up. Each day is a new challenge. We have done some each day brings us some very, very cool and very, very challenging briefs, not only in terms of time, but in terms of scale, in terms of technology. And today, to be believed, if you ask me, with COVID, we have, I would, I wouldn't say we have crossed the bridge, but we're trying to cross a bridge from a design challenge perspective, wherein the kind of work that we were doing till the beginning of the pandemic was extremely hands-on. It involved a lot of face-to-face experiences, uh, and we and at that point everything changed, if you notice. So the biggest learning from this last 18 months, and is if I were to put things in perspective, is how this entire concept of future has evolved. uh, at which point, when I was approached to do this talk and this presentation on the future of design, I actually, even though I took it uh, at face value at that point of time, I'll be honest, uh, it set me thinking as to what is the future. I mean, we need to ask ourselves that, and we need to keep going back and forth to establish this concept of future. Uh, are we talking about near-term future? Are we talking about medium-term future? Are we talking about long-term future? And if you ask me, the last 18 months, if that has taught me anything, it's not to look too far into the long-term future. And at this point, let me go back, because I need to establish some context as to what this future business is. And this is my first question out to the group out there, as to, I need you to help me to identify who these two gentlemen are, because these form a large part of my contextualization of future as we go ahead. Okay, the floor is yours. So if you would like to participate in this, I'll give you 3 minutes. You can put it in the chat if you want. And if somebody is moderating this, please read them out loud. Anyone?
So we got an answer in, sir.
Yeah.
Is it Steven Spielberg and James Cameron?
Absolutely bang on. You will find that because of the kind of work that I've done in the past, in with The Amazing Race and Filmfare and Femina and what I do now, you'll find a lot of media references. And also because I consume media like a sponge. Growing up in the 90s, these two were, I would say, not kind of heroes, but they were people that I looked on to, because I was enamored by the kind of work that they do. I have, during the course of my time in The Amazing Race, a lot of my colleagues have had the amazing opportunity to work with these two brilliant futurists. If you go back to both of their genres, both talk a lot. A lot of their work has talked about the future, of course, in very, very different ways. James Cameron is way more, if you look at his work, I would discount Titanic here. Let's say, for example, uh, sorry, uh, in, let's say, Minority Report from Spielberg and Terminator from James Cameron, you'll realize how different these two directors approach this whole medium of storytelling and narrative and filmmaking. But what I want to do, bring about here is this. While Terminator, I remember I was in school when this film came about, and this was like really, really talked about cinema then. Those were the times of VCRs. You remember? I don't know whether a lot of you guys know that, but there used to be this concept called a VCR, which was essentially this giant box which had a spool, almost like a cassette recorder, like an oversized cassette recorder that you would insert into this clunky old machine that would then play back uh, video signals. So, but what I would like to focus here is in 2000, in 1984 when Terminator came out, it talked about a lot of the concepts that we see today. Things like drones, things like non-human technology, and by non-human technology, I don't mean just robots, but also things like uh, let's say, for example, biometry, of analyzing big data, things so on and so forth. They talked about autonomous intelligence. While if we cut to Minority Report, which came out in 2002, it talked about how you use big data and touch technology and gesture control to identify things that would happen in the future, very much like uh, how Netflix works today. And then cut to 2007 through another futurist, which uh, Mr. Steve Jobs, who kind of, I wouldn't say not kind of, but he changed the entire paradigm altogether when the iPhone was launched. And this, in my opinion, was a humongous paradigm shift in this nature of, or rather in this course of future, because it brought about touch technology. It changed the way we spoke, we communicated. It changed the way uh, devices would work. Remember that the precursor to this object was this really clunky device made out of engineering plastic, while we're still dealing with analog telephones, which were often made out of bakelite. And you had to do an entire process if you wanted to redial someone. But then uh, this new technology changed a whole lot of things. Among them, the way we consumed music. It kind of killed the entire music business by coming up with this concept uh, called iTunes. It changed the way devices would work, and it entirely changed uh, the way everything will happen from 2007 onwards in terms of the of visual, oral, and other forms of communication. This, I feel, in my opinion, was where, let's say, for example, the future as we name it, kind of started evolving. It, if you look at it not just from communication standpoint, but also from, let's say, device design standpoint. For all those of you in product design, like the way I have, it changed completely the way a device was designed. The entire thing would fit into your palm, and the way that this device would operate almost felt like it was empowering you. It was an experience like anything else that one had ever seen. So back to this whole concept of the future. What is this future? And to do that, I do believe that we have to set some things in place in terms of what is the now, so that one is able to, let's say, for figure out as to how things will be going forward. And I thought this was a very, very cool way to show the reality of today. All of us consume Netflix, but what is this concept? Just a second. Our reality is that we are living in a data driven, high bandwidth, extremely high bandwidth, we on demand reality, where things can be modulated, tailored, tinkered to exactly what you would need or what you would want. We live in a reality where the product is often a software, or it's a nebulous thing called an app in that doesn't at times doesn't need a hardware, or at times it does need a hardware, but the hardware is often subliminal. It's there to just convey this concept of of something. It's intuitive. It's it's oftentimes simple. It's pleasurable. It's emotional. Uh, but all of this is happening at extremely high speeds. This wouldn't have been even conceived of in 2000 or in 1994 when I was at NIT. Absolutely no way. I mean, a lot of these things were talked about in terms of, let's say, in almost Isaac Asimovian discussions as to, you could do this, you could do that. But to have this kind of a reality in such a short span of time was almost inconceivable. So let this be the context going forward, right? So, so I did some deep digging in terms of, matlab, it also set a lot of things rolling for me as well in terms of how do I place myself in the reality of 2021 and will, how things will evolve going forward. Uh, I am a practitioner of design. We deal with clients from day to day. We deal with challenging briefs on a day-to-day basis. We work with various brand concepts on a daily basis. And to be very honest, it seems like, uh, you know, till at least the beginning of 2018, that a lot of things will remain the way they would have had the COVID not happened. What COVID actually did was it accelerated the future way faster than any of us could have anticipated in design terms. And overnight, we had to change the way we thought. We had to evolve our entire design process. We had to tinker or re-evolve our entire creative process. We had to relook our design deliveries. We had to relook the way uh, our end solutions would be. We had to, and we were surprised with what we came up with. And we were even more surprised that they actually worked. So that span of 1.5 years uh, has kind of developed some new thinking among us at Showbiz Havas. Uh, that has developed a whole new way of, let's say, addressing things personally. So a lot of these five, let's say, chapters that will come up now are like a kind of uh, creative thinking, so to speak, in the last 18 months. The first being, good design will be good business. And this is not something new. We always have to remember that design, while it being a creative activity at its core, it is a commercial activity. We design always has uh, an end commercial goal in mind. Let's say, for example, forget all of the things that it has to fulfill emotional needs and it has to fulfill sustainability needs and so on and so forth. Those I will set them aside. I will set them aside because those are things uh, that are defined, as designers and as part of the design process and the way we address design. So I'm not going to go into that. What I'm going to go into is into a divergent uh, road as to how and what design uh, intents will behave in the near future. So coming back to this, uh, we have, let's say, for example, as creatives, we always have this ongoing battle with another department within creative agencies, which are called client servicing and business development and all of that. And they're there practically because of this purpose, because design is actually business. And this is not something new, because if you design something great, then it sells well. Look at any product that you would have interacted with, or any brand that you would have interacted with. Most of them are successful because they're essentially great brands that have great products and great services. And because those great brands and great services have been designed very well, whether it's a product or whether it's a service, or whether it's an app, or whether it's software, or it's a hardware, or if it's a phone, or if it's a pen, whatever you name it, right? Which is why some brands work very well, some brands don't. And this concept isn't entirely new. So what you see on my screen here is actually a letter that was written by Thomas Watson, who was the CEO and president of IBM way back in 1957. I mean, and this is not my quote. So this quote is something that we grew up as part of our design studies, uh, wherein as part of design history, I had researched IBM as one as a design leader among corporates. And this was a thought by Thomas Watson as head of an enterprise. He thought he had identified very early that the design process uh, looks at things differently, and therefore, if an enterprise inducted or inculcated design thinking among its entire let's say human resource, it would lift the way that entire company would think, behave, operate, so on and so forth. And to do that at that point of time, which was unprecedented, and I still think it was one of the boldest moves ever in design history, when he called on the likes of Charles and Ray Eames and Paul Rand, uh, etc., to help develop IBM's entire ethos of how they interacted with design uh, to develop and produce great products. And we need to be very mindful of this, and this will never go away. And this, as uh, I'll be honest with you, as a design student, we had a whole lot of very utopian, you know, rose tinted view of design, that that we live in a perfect world where you do great design. And it's only when we came out and started interacting with the industry in our internship, then we realized that okay, this is an entirely new business, or it's an entirely different thing altogether, in which it would invariably a huge eye opener, and it would put things in place. We will come back very chastised, and uh, believe me, it was a it would be a very humbling experience, because you will realize that there were a entire world out there who would put you in place. In a design perspective, you realize that you would learn a lot from people on the shop floor. You would learn a lot from people in accounting, who would tell you how a product or a service or a design could be value engineered. We learned a lot from printers, and overall, this entire business of the design business was something that uh, was one key thing that I remembered going forward. I'll share something with you, that on in my first year as a design practitioner, when I joined Blue, was uh, I was asked to design a drinks trolley for the cricket match in the cricket series between, if I'm not mistaken, between India and Australia. And I designed something which looked extremely great on paper. It looked great on a render. I was extremely happy with it. And when we sent it to produce, I got, I came to office that week with this really, uh, great grin on my face, only to have my boss uh, come down on me screaming, because my design didn't factor in that it would take approximately 800 weld joints. And for all of you doing product design, I hope you understand that what that means. That means that uh, my design was so complicated that while it looked great on paper and great on render, that would need probably 1200 different parts that would have to be welded together, right? And that wasn't great sense at all from any perspective, not from a design perspective, not from a manufacturing perspective, and definitely not from a business perspective, because it just upset that entire the value chain of production. It just held up. It was too complicated to make. If we wouldn't have managed to finish it in the time that it needed to be built, so that it could enter the stadium on time, and so on and so forth. So that was a learning going forward. So each time that I as a creative director, when I interact with my team of designers, while it's very, very important to have a great design that's aesthetically and visually pleasing, it's also, one also has to keep in mind if at all it can be manufactured in the right way, because somewhere design does cost money. uh, Point two is, you know uh, I know a lot of you, this is a cross section, I believe, from first year to fourth year, and some of you would have interacted with the outside world at some point in the internships, maybe through a short internship or through your capstone projects. And all of us, including us till now, have this uh, notion that clients don't understand design. To some extent, it is true. I'll reveal that. Uh, but that has a context, right? And the way things are moving right now, this is one of my core beliefs. uh, Over extended interactions with clients, that design will become important to every company. And by every company, I just don't mean tech companies, I mean engineering companies, I mean manufacturing industry, I mean automotive, everybody, and not just from an aesthetic sense. Please, and remember that when I say design, I don't always mean graphic design or product design, uh, and that is something that I will come at a later point in this presentation. We live, like I said, in that context a couple of slides ago, that we are a new reality of data. We are in a new reality of mobile devices. We are in new reality of high speed, of extreme high bandwidths, of cloud, of social media. So the larger industry, and I mean industries, had to recalibrate the way it approached, or it approached audiences and customers, right? Uh, for many, very, very many years, the concept of design was making cool products. It meant cool graphics, it meant cool logos, it meant great looking cars. Not anymore. It had a unidirectional way of being presented to customers. But this entire concept of data, this entire concept of mobile, and the entire concept of social media has made companies reevaluate this concept of design. Uh, Not just from delivery standpoint, but also from a thought standpoint. Uh, what I said in the last uh, slide about Thomas Watson uh, evoking the concept of design thinking among IBM. A lot of uh, companies now have come to realize the importance of design thinking, primarily because it allows you to think and arrive at solutions from different sources. It allows you to uh, think, or rather, I would say, engage with customers and audiences from, let's say, perspectives of empathy, from perspectives of, let's say, for example, tolerances of failure. They've come to realize that the emotional resonance of products and services, of a value proposition, is as important as the way a product of a service looks. And that is a huge shift that I am seeing uh, in the last 2 years, and it also has a lot to do as to how society has evolved in these last 2 or 3 years, with concepts like inclusivity, with concepts like diversity, like concepts like for example, what do you call it, uh, simply put, how you present yourself in as, let's say, for example, empathetic to individual groups needs or groups wants, or a lot of times even politics of the day. And therefore uh, this is uh, one of my beliefs as to how design thinking will be cemented in corporate cultures. And what I see is, or what I believe is a great way forward for us designers. What I also think is, let's say for example, in this concept, in this world of inclusion, in this concept of diversity, etc., one also has to companies have also realized now that, you know, a straightforward design is does not cut it anymore, right? Because uh, data has allowed us to put audiences into various packets. And by packets I mean uh, not homogenized, or rather uni featured entities like it used to be, let's say for example 5-10 years ago. You will sorry, we have come to realize that each customer is different from the other in terms of preferences, in terms of likes and dislikes. And therefore it has become very, very important for brands and manufacturers and companies to realize that there has to be a, a supplemental layer to the design to target each of these social groups. This is an example from something that I'm working on recently. This is an exhibition for for Toyota in the upcoming Auto Expo that will happen in 2022. Even though that this is not the final design, because I cannot share that yet. And this is uh, one of our earlier concepts that were modeled for an initial level engagement with the client. What you will see here is a traditional design. You know, this concept of displaying a product over a large extended space. But that is not enough anymore. I mean, 4 years ago this would have worked, but now Toyota has realized that just selling an Innova is not enough. It needs to engage customers, different ages of customers, because you have different product offerings for different age and income groups, starting from Glanza all the way to the Innova to the Fortuner, so on and so forth. So the story here is that Toyota is evolving, and how do you show that story to an audience that may very well possible be virtual, because we are still not sure as to whether COVID will be settled by the time this thing gets on the ground in February of 2022. So the larger story is of sustainability, because that is something that Toyota is practicing actively in Japan. They have worked uh, very, very deeply with architects, with futurists, with technologists, etc., to come up with product lines that are in resonance with an ever-changing world. They have identified that the internal combustion engine is extremely polluting, and that story has to change. So what is this? So how do we bring about that story in an exhibition space? Remember that exhibitions are temporary. This will be there for all of 6 days, after which the entire thing will be dismantled, almost 80% of which will be trashed, and and therefore completely unsustainable, right? So one of our concepts was, why can't this exhibition booth or pavilion generates its own energy, right? Without actually telling the visitor that it actually does, that each time that you walk on these specially designed floor panels, you're actually charging, or you're generating energy here. uh, so these were one of the few stories uh, that we are building into the narrative. That So these are the supplemental layers that I'm talking about. uh, when it comes to delivering a design these days, that it's just not enough to create a straightforward design. Now you have to remember that uh, this kind of an exhibition is actually a B2B exhibition, or rather business to business exhibition for most parts of the week. Uh, for 3 days of the week it becomes a business to consumer exhibition, which means it's thrown open to the larger public. And I do admit that a lot of the visitors here wouldn't be wouldn't be, I would say, mindful of that fact that this entire concept of sustainability has been built into this entire exhibition, starting from the choice of materials to things that are happening in terms of engagements, to the things that you do unsubconsciously or unconsciously as a visitor to the brand space, to the kind of stories that you are watching on screens. But we also have to keep in mind that also the unmindful visitor is also a consumer, and he is also part of the demographic that Toyota addresses, besides the whole lot of another set of consumers who would be mindful of the fact. But the attempt is to bring all of them into the fold. And there are a whole lot of other narratives and experience that have been built into this. This is just 1/4 of the space that I'm revealing to you now. I do hope that you will be able to catch it either in person in February 22 in Delhi when this happens next year, or if not, if pandemic is still out there to get us, uh, we are creating a virtual model which will be far more detailed, with far greater, because virtual allows us to do that, uh, in-person experiences with products, by the time February comes. So you'll be able to see that entire exhibition at that point of time virtually. I will definitely share all of those links with all of you to experience that, uh, in the hope that you will come back to us and tell us whether it was good, bad, or ugly. Moving on. And this is the other part of why I think this entire business of design thinking, of design process led uh, process among brands and companies would be the way going forward, because brands and products don't exist in isolation anymore. uh, in a lot many times, especially in this example, the product at the core of the brand is actually a service, right? It's a nebulous thing. It's something uh, that you experience through a device. It's something that you don't touch, but something that you experience. But is it just enough for that brand to be? It is not the case anymore. Brands have realized that they need to be far greater than one service. They need to be an entire ecosystem, and which is why, if you notice, if you look at brands, let's say like Google or Amazon or Apple, or increasingly OnePlus and Huawei and so on and so forth, they are a far greater uh, concept than what they had started out years ago. So if you notice, they are services, they are products. Amazon, what started out essentially as a delivery system, now has something called Alexa, and Jeff Bezos is going off into space. And that just kind of exemplifies as to how far the creative landscape and the creative horizon has been extended. And that has led me to believe that this entire design process will need to be tinkered. And when I say tinkered, it doesn't, I would like to emphasize that I do not mean retooled, which kind of means overhauled. I would What I would like to emphasize here is, while the design process works to a very large degree, we also have to keep in mind and put the context as to what times the design process was developed, and the kind of processes and manufacturing, etc., that it catered to. And with the concept of data, and this entire process now has to have a little bit of, let's say, a little bit of a tune up, right? So what is that tune up? Uh, for all of you going out into the big bad world, here on, will need to realize that while you need to have supreme tech skills, and by that I don't mean Photoshop, or I don't mean Illustrator, or I don't mean CAD, uh, but real tech skills, which means a little bit of coding, a little a little bit of, or rather, as much as you would know about hardware, about a little bit about software and hardware engineering, and a great amount of entrepreneurship and a business attitude to be combined with the entire design side of things. Growing up, this was something I would admit that was not really built into the toolkit. But now in this new reality, where we are embracing different needs, we are embracing different wants, we are embracing different creative requirements, we are looking at entirely new ways of design and service delivery, and these are increasingly getting built into our design process on a daily basis, and that I believe is the way going forward. uh, a large part of our design delivery these days includes uh, engagements in virtual and digital. Whether it's, let's say, for example, we are dealing brand engagements for automobiles, whether we are creating engagements for FMCG products, even if we are designing experiences for, uh, let's say, banking products. Each time there is, because of this entire concept where you can target very very specific audiences, that this new design solution in the virtual, hybrid and digital space has to be included in the design delivery as well. Which brings us to this. uh, I've grown tired of clients telling me, think out of the box. I would actually love to tell clients to give me a brief which does not include that phrase. And because of tech, and because of data, and because of social, and because of device, and because of all these things, we are now, I would say, uh, to add to that permission to play outside the sandbox, but rather we have been forced to play outside and think outside of the sandbox. We are being forced to break stereotypes. We are having to, like I said in my last slide, having to uh, rejig the design process. It has also led us to disrupt our way of thinking, of disrupt the way we approach design solutions. Uh, we have we have found solutions from the most unlikeliest of uh, people or resources, or we have found solutions from, let's say, we have found that an automobile solution brief has solution has come from graphic design, and not necessarily from an interior designer or a spatial designer or an architect, as the brief would have dictated in normal times. And this is one of the biggest drivers that has, I would say, contributed, but also necessitated and helped, I would say, pushed us in this direction of looking at new paradigms. Uh, and I will share something that we have done recently uh, to amplify on that concept. Uh, okay, so this is like a very small part of a much larger uh, brand AV that we created for one of our clients right at the beginning of the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit us, it kind of disrupted our entire process, because all of a sudden we didn't know what to do, because brands didn't know what to do, clients didn't know what to do. uh, we sat out for the first couple of months because we were just too shell shocked, but over uh, let's say a couple of months down the line, clients, brands, everybody woke up to the fact that, boss, we need to operate, we need to exist, we need to reach out to customers, we need to go and communicate and engage with them, uh, but we can't do that like the way we used to, because there is this new challenge that we have on our hands. uh, so we came up with this concept that uh, if we can't engage in person, in reality, face to face, are we able to do that virtually? There's no stopping us, so long as somebody has decent bandwidth and somebody has a device, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a laptop or a computer, that's more than enough. So we started creating virtual scenarios. What it did was, so therefore, now you see how it's, this entire pandemic has forced us to rethink and retool our entire design process, because the normal design process does not work anymore, in the sense that while it worked in what was happening inside environments, but I had an entire design process to figure out as to how we can reach audiences without them having to meet us in person. And while this was happening, remember that a whole lot of clients, some of the work that I'll share with you right now, are who are in various geographies. This particular project was done for a client in the Philippines, uh, which is essentially one of the largest uh, what do you call it, conferences of physicians in Southeast Asia, right? So now geography not being a barrier, uh, a whole, let's say, bouquet of design opportunities open up to you. So we created entire virtual worlds, and we had great fun with it. We created anything and everything. Basically what happened was, I had an entire team of designers who had nothing to do, and because frankly briefs had stopped, uh, we got tired of sitting and doing nothing. How much Netflix can you watch? We had watched reruns of reruns. I for myself must have watched Narcos at least 5 times till I was, it was coming out of my ears, and I had a fidgety team on my hands. So while addressing this brief, we realized that it was set in Manila and all of that, but it kind of opened up this entire world of possibilities to us, that an engagement can happen anywhere. It can happen in space or for lack of space, uh, so long as you could design an engagement that the brand wanted you to, right? Which leads me to my next example.
Right from the outset, we thought about this project differently. We've done things differently at every stage of the process. The end result is something really out of this world. Jaguar IP's concept is still made to be hugely successful in every place. It's a performance car, a family car, and an SUV all in one. And it's electric. This car is a natural evolution for Jaguar. It's bold, it's different, is still unmistakably a JD. It's pretty cool. You like that?
I like the run.
So this entire rejigging of my design process led me to understand technology. It it developed my editing skills. It I learned uh, a little bit of the filming process. I was anyway doing that on the race and uh, other television shows that I was helping create. Uh, it helped me understand, or rather develop my animation skills. It helped me create things for virtual. It helped me visualize. It forced us to design things for spaces that aren't actually there. uh, and with all of these new skills, we added all of these uh, skills and resources and technologies in house, wherein now we can create entire virtual experiences, right from let's say green screens to uh, virtual brand engagements, right from our offices in Worli. We have now added editors. We have now added more animators. We've cinematographers, photographers, etc. into our into the entire design team that we have. And what was earlier a very on ground experience is now a very virtual. And as the COVID situation is improving, getting better and getting bad with each day, we decide whether it's going to be a hybrid experience or whether it's going to be a completely virtual experience. A hybrid experience would mean something that is part reality and most of it is virtual. Like the example that you see is actually a hybrid experience where you have a lot of people in person in engaging with a product on a virtual scale. Uh, I work a lot with OnePlus. I'm 100% sure a lot of you are OnePlus consumers. OnePlus is one of my favorite brands that I work with. Uh, it's it's a Chinese brand. Their outlook is extremely futuristic. They pride themselves on being called the Apple of China, and they have done extremely well from every perspective, whether it's design, whether it's the quality of the product, whether it's the product experience, whether it's the retail experience, etc. The new reality today is that in lot many times the object has no significance, and the mobile phone is a perfect example of that. What started as a communication tool 15 years ago or maybe 18 years ago is no more the case. We use it for everything else, uh, probably more than we speak or communicate in it. We are communicating, but in very different ways. We are communicating through Instagram, but through a device, right? We are communicating through LinkedIn, but through a device. And one of the best uh, one of the OnePlus the last launch line itself kind of set this thought rolling in my head as to how objects are way less important than the services that they allow you to access. Is when OnePlus was launching the 9 series, uh, the key point of communication was the camera, where they are tied up with Hasselblad. The conversation was no more about whether you can speak through a phone, whether uh, you talk to someone, whether you message someone. It was no more about communication in the real sense, but it was about the camera. right? So now, what was essentially a communication device is now everything but a communication device. I'm not saying that we have stopped communicating through it. I'm saying we are communicating in way different ways than we had originally thought of. Each of those, uh, let's say, for example, delivery systems that Instagram is, or LinkedIn is, or any of these apps are essentially communication delivery tools. We are communicating uh, in different ways through them. It's no more important that that particular device delivery uh, be the primary, let's say, designed object, but rather there is a whole lot of things that are being, it's the sum, or rather it's the sum total of an entire design process, because it's from what maybe 20 years ago was just a team of product designers, but it's now an entire team of, let's say, product designers, hardware designers, software designers, camera designers, lens designers, communication designers, motion graphics designers, that are now developing an entire product. And this is one of the examples that in that direction. So while what you see here is a space, this is a brand space that we developed for a Japanese American company called Entity Data. They are a data analytics and tech consultancy company based out of Bangalore in India. So they came to us with a very, I would say, straightforward brief. They wanted us to design the brand space, as simple as that. On my first client meetings that among the numerous that I had in Bangalore, when they took us through their existing premises in Whitefield, one of the things two things that I saw, which really kind of set the ball rolling towards this entire design solution that we created for them. One was a racing suit, which was displayed in this glass box. Almost, it was in a corner. It didn't. If you pass through it, you wouldn't probably, look at it twice. And just out of curiosity, I asked them what that was about. And they told me this entire story as to how NTT is one of the primary sponsors of the NASCAR rally that happens in the United States. Okay, it's one of the premier, if not the automotive event in the US. And NTT does the entire data handling processes of that event. The second thing that I saw there was a golf club, wherein they told me that they are also the data team and the primary sponsors for the Augusta Masters, which is like, I don't know, the World Cup of golf in roughly put. So that our design thinking and the solution building actually began from there, in the sense that there were these two very interesting concepts of product and service engagement that frankly a lot of us would be interested in knowing, especially the Augusta Masters. It was, and our design solution kind of started developing itself from there as to how do you allow a visitor to this space to understand how data did what it did in each of these sectors that entity consulted in, right from uh, oil to engineering to aviation to sports, etc., etc. So the solution that we created for them was almost like a choreography. So we divided that entire visit into these 5 key, let's say, experiences or encounters wherein uh, you would arrive at the facility, you would be introduced uh, to entity, and introduce would introduce itself back to you. uh, it would orient your visit, and it would motivate your entire experience to engage with entity as a consultant. So this is what finally was designed. So if you notice, that was that very incurious racing suit that you had. But what actually happened was behind the scenes. What it did was, no visit to this place was ever a chance visit. It was always a predetermined visit, right? So the solution that we created was a customized, uh, tailored customer experience. So the entire facility would orient its way, or orient its, let's say, for example, its services and its solutions and its examples uh, according to you. It would personalize by itself. So let's say, for example, if you are in aviation, your entire experience here would be tailored to aviation. It will not confuse with you with, let's say, for example, or rather bombard with you with data that you didn't want. It will not throw out content at you that had no relevance. It would not throw out audio visuals of projects that entity has done in, let's say, oil, when you are here to start a new airline, for example. So everything that is happening here is behind the scenes. Everything that is happening here has been designed uh, to, let's say, for example, using data to create a personalized experience to an individual and his, let's say, for example, his preferred area of consultancy that he would like to engage entity with. And this is my last, let's say, for example, belief going forward, that the walls of design will crumble. And like I was saying with OnePlus, we will no more be uh, product designers and communication designers or graphic designers or so on and so forth. If you want to do design well, you need to have an understanding of all the deliveries of the design world. You will need to, while I'm a product designer, I now work with branding. I do graphic design. I do a lot of UI and UX. Uh, Simply because that entire design solution has evolved. Like I said earlier in my earlier slides, that it's just not enough to be a product designer to design a phone. There's an entire army of, you need a whole lot of expertises and a whole lot of experts to design products, because the entire ecosystem demands that. And this is, I thought, while I end my presentation, I leave with this film that kind of shows how things, times, uh, products, services, and therefore its demand from designers has evolved over the years.
The introduction of mobile phones changed all of our lives, and so did mobile displays. And as display technology evolved, new possibilities were created. You felt the rush of interactivity and instant engagement. Mobile displays became more than just pixels. They were portals through which we could capture new experiences and relive memories. And through our displays, we saw life display. OnePlus saw the chance to provide people with an even better window onto the world. We introduced the first ever 2K 90Hz Fluid display, heralding a new era of display innovation. Everything became faster, smoother, and even more seamless. Incredible advances have transformed display technology. What will the future hold for us? Introducing OnePlus 9 Pro with Fluid Display 2.0. It's time to take the next giant leap forward.
Full disclosure, I'm not plugging OnePlus, but I borrowed this because they happen to be great clients, and they also happen to be great friends and great people to work with. So this is where I end. I will throw the floor to questions, queries, whatever. I'm always happy to talk.
Great, sir. Now we will have the Q&A session. Just put your questions in the chat box and I will read them to you, sir. So, sir, while others put in some questions in the chat box, I had one actually. So, in the presentation, you said that design will become important in every company, like going forth. But now, as we see throughout this pandemic, while everyone shifts online, we can already see that kind of change happening wherein, you know, every single thing that the person is coming across has something to do with how, like, the representation of it is something that is required. So I had a question as to how moving forward we should make it such that the attention span as well as the design as well as the, you know, importance of the content remains in a well balanced design.
I didn't get your question, honestly.
So, like, you're saying that in design will become important in every aspect, right? So how do we maintain, like, what kind of a suggestion can you give to maintain the importance of the content that we want to put forth while also keeping the attention span of people in mind and the design? How do we keep all that in loop to create something that is, you know, something that the consumer as well as the company can benefit from?
So two things here. You'll have to keep in mind that good content will always be good content. If your content is not good, if it's not great, and given the extremely short attention spans that we have these days, the user will switch off within seconds.
Yes.
So it becomes imperative that your content is great. There is no amount of great looking design can ever compensate for great content. Which means the content has to be thought through. It has to go through all the checks that it possibly can. It needs to tick all the boxes of your design brief. And by content, I hope I am understanding concept, right? So, but that said, a great concept will also need a great visualization and communication to give justice to that. It also does not work if you have a great concept or great content, but you have not presented it well. So it becomes imperative. So the better your design skills are, and believe me, I get a lot of work from design students who send portfolios, and from people who want to apply for jobs or people who want to collaborate with us. We get great looking portfolios. By great looking, I mean great looking, right? But if you were to actually sift through the details, a lot of times you realize that, that what you're seeing on slides will not often stand the test of scrutiny. Right? Because it hasn't really been thought through. And so, therefore, it's always good, or rather it's imperative to have great concept, a great narrative, or in your words, great content, but it's also equally important to have great communication. Now that communication could be graphic design, it could be verbal, it could be a film, it could be an animation. The communication tool can vary. I hope that addresses your question.
Yes, yes, sir. So we have another question coming from Nachiket, year one. If a designer thinks or works on a very high level, but the client demands very basic projects, does this affect the whole design future and design thinking?
You'll have to define what high level is, and then B, you also need to define what design future and design thinking is. It, are you talking the design future in personal terms?
Yes, sir. Sir, like about the whole thing, sir. So my question was that if a designer is set on a example, designer is set on a level A, and the client asks for level like very low level project. So if this is like degrading stuff or means
See, uh, we face that on a day-to-day basis, and like I said earlier in my presentation, there are contexts to that, right? And there could be a whole lot of them. Lot of times, maybe the client doesn't have a great understanding of his own brand, maybe because he's new, maybe because in a rush, maybe he has too many things on his head. He needs something put out in the market in double quick time because he forgot his deadlines. There could be any number of reasons, or maybe he's just not interested. He just wants to put something out because that is a checklist in his Excel sheet, right? Uh, and like all creators, we have huge egos, right? We think our design is the best, and we think that maybe he could have done this better, where a whole, so there are steps to that, right? Like for example, it becomes extremely imperative for people, for designers, when they engage with clients, to also educate them as you go along. But it's also important to understand the value of business that he's bringing in, and what he's expecting at that point of time. So while I do understand your concern, because we live it on a daily, weekly basis, but we do understand that uh, while we go back with solutions, we also have, let's say for example, we have a design A which addresses his immediate need, but we also have a design that tells him that this is the way forward, which is based on long-term strategy, which is based on critical thinking, which is based through an extensive research and design process. And in a lot many times when we have begun to engage with clients on uh, in longer sessions or over a period of time, we have figured that it actually works, right? They become receptive to your understanding, because over time, when you come back with, let's say for example, solutions that are based in design logic and brand logic, they come to understand that you empathize with the brand and you understand the brand, and that you are a partner in his as well as the brand success. And when I say success, that means both in terms of success, in terms of, let's say, personal growth, but success in also in terms of the revenue and the bottom line. Which if you go back to my slide where I started out by saying good design is good business, this is what I mean. That you are equal partners in the revenue or in the bottom line of your client.
thank you, sir. I got you.
Design a good logo, each time you design a good service design, each time you design a good systems design or anything, you design a good interior, you are addressing different kinds of customers, audiences in the value chain, right? So your design today, aaj nahi to kal, definitely gets appreciated.
Thank you, sir. I got it.
Thank you, Nachiket. So, sir, we have.
Build that balance. I have learned at my peril the complete non-value of design arrogance.
So we have another question from Manisha ma'am. How do you see the role of VR evolving in brand experiences in spite of the prohibitive costs?
To be honest, two things. The cost is not prohibitive anymore because you have something like Google Cardboard, which is very, very inexpensive. So that addresses the cost factor. But in terms of design solution and delivery, VR will be, I wouldn't say the way forward, but a huge component of the way forward. Because what the virtual has, this pandemic has shown us that VR is an extremely not only just strategic, but also in terms of touch, feel, experience. It allows you a whole lot of possibilities. You can experience entire right from, let's say for example, we've created an entire VR experience of a car assembly for Skoda, right? For their dealerships or their for the service personnel. That is a technical engagement. But we've also created VR engagements, let's say for brands like Mercedes for new product launches. We've created VR experiences for in the education sector. Like I really would have liked to show you that project, but there is still a whole lot of NDA involved with, because the government and the Ministry of Science and Technology and all of this people are involved. So it will get rolling in a couple of months' time, and I would love to share that project with you. We're using VR very inexpensive with headsets, Google Cardboard essentially, to enhance distance learning for tier 2 and tier 3 cities, to people who have dropped out of schools but would like to undergo science and math education, so that it helps them upskill and be absorbed into the Tata's various businesses.
So ma'am is asking, what were the devices deployed in these projects?
Devices in each, you would have to probably amplify that question a little bit.
What I mean
Manisha?
is, were they cardboard devices, or did you have other HMDs also actually?
There were cardboard devices. In a lot many cases, they were Oculus, which is Oculus because we do have a huge inventory of Oculuses in-house, so we were able to give them to clients. But that hardware delivery also works differently for various kind of clients and different kinds of, obviously because it varies with budget, and also for different kind of projects. So for this this learning project that I was doing with the Education and Science and Technology Ministry and the Tatas, because we were looking at people below a certain income level, it was mostly Google Cardboard. But for Skoda, it was Oculus. Because for two reasons. A, the solution at the end of that project were very different. While the Skoda project involved a whole lot of visual finesse, because a lot of it was extremely technical and animated and so on and so forth. And so therefore, and because we also had access to better bandwidths as opposed to the upskilling project. So therefore, the two kinds of devices in each of these projects.
Yeah, thank you. I think we deploy with Google Cardboard, and there is a lot of possibilities in that low-end device as well. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
And because of the large, in the last 18 months, the kind of the usage that this entire technology has thrown up, I do believe that the cost of each of these products will come down, not drastically, but at least considerably going forward, given that we have found value in that.
So we have another question from a student, Achintya from year 3. It says various fields, especially such as healthcare, requires one to first gain knowledge about the subject. So in future, will a designer's role become more specific or instead more broader? That is, will they need to grasp information from different fields?
I think that is a question for the ages. At every point of time, uh, see designers in this weird space uh, that we don't know anything, and yet you need to know everything, right? And every project is a learning process. With every new project that every new brief that I encounter, uh, there is a lot of research involved, because you can't good design will never uh, address the brief correctly unless it's well researched. So yes, we will need to know everything. You don't have to know everything in terms of you don't need to go into a project knowing everything. It is not possible to do that, right? I I didn't know car assembly till I started engaging with all the various auto brands that I work with, right? Uh, I didn't know cloud till I started engaging with VMware, so on and so forth. But the more I engage with clients, the more I engage with over new briefs, uh, it becomes part of my job to know these things, because I can't go back to clients with a half-baked idea or things that are not ground in reality and with the right information.
Okay. Then there's another from Pranjal. While change is important, what is something that has remained constant throughout the design history and will continue to remain consistent in the future?
Drawing skills. Never underestimate the power of a good sketch.
Okay, and the last one we have right now is from Arpita. Okay, it's not the last one. Sir, you mentioned that the walls of design will crumble. So according to you, will the future demand generalist designers or specialist designers?
I wouldn't call them generalists, but I will call them super specialists. When you say generalist, that means almost like jack of all trades but master of none. But here we'll have to be jack of all trades, master of everything. Uh, I've had colleagues who work. Uh, they are product designers and they are proudly continuing to be product designers. So while on a particular day they're designing housing for, let's say, Excite batteries, but couple of days down the week they're designing very high precision surgical tools, right? So they are able to handle, and this is also part of the addresses part of the previous question, right? uh, Two very different skills, two very different briefs, two absolutely different industries, uh, and they wouldn't have been able to do great design unless they kind of immerse themselves into that particular brief and into that particular field, underwent first-hand experiences as to how we interacted with these products, both as consumers, as retailers, etc., etc., from every perspective, and to be able to design something that was good, right? And that way, uh, I would like to disagree with the generalist term that we will need to, like I said, undergo a very thorough research process, immerse ourselves into the subject to be able to come up and address briefs with meaningful design. And that in fact would stand true for every kind of design that you do.
Okay. So there's another question from Path Khare from year 1. Can we say that the field of design is changing from product, furniture, transportation design, etc., to actually interaction design overall? like interaction of user with products, screens, or services, where a designer is maybe designing a bigger chunk of the system and not just the product?
To a lot extent, yes. If you would have heard this largely used term these days called the experience, right? And not to say that, till now we were not experiencing or we were not engaging. We just didn't have a term for it, right? Products, services, no design exists in isolation. There's always a context around it. There's always an interactive cloud around it in terms of surroundings, in terms of experiences. Simply put, in the context that it is in let's say in time, space, usability, etc., etc. It's just that right now we are able to come up with very specific titles for it, whether you call it interactive, whether you call it engagement, whether you call it experience. It kind of means the same thing.
Okay. And the last question for the session. So, sir, you talked about good design being a good business, but because of the state of things today, the uncertainty in our lives has multiplied a lot. As designers and leaders, how can we navigate this area?
Oh, okay. I do hope, and it's a great question, to be honest, because yes, that's a massive, massive, massive challenge. COVID actually has upset the apple cart in good ways, bad ways. In the good ways, I told you a little while ago as to how it has forced us to reassess, to reevaluate, come up with new ways of designing things and experiences, and therefore it has started demanding new skills out of us. It has also started demanding a new set of questions from clients. Clients are now beginning to think, will I survive? Right? Uh, because Purely because they had a very linear way of operations. They had a very linear way of thinking, of delivery, etc., etc. And now this is forcing them to think things from various different perspectives. And similarly, as designers, we will also have to do the same. Uh, yes, the challenge does exist, but thankfully, because of technology, a lot of sectors are beginning to open up, and in fact, they're flourishing. Right? There will be some areas that will still need some handholding. It'll still take them some time because of cost, because of access to technology, etc., etc. But it will happen. We do believe, and we're seeing consumer confidence grow, and therefore when consumer confidence grows, uh, it starts to set a lot of things rolling, from design perspective and from client perspective. So while to address the current crisis, the rate of things improve with the rate of vaccinations. The more vaccinations you have, the more clients are confident, the more consumers are confident, the more we go out. And we already seeing that with a lot of our international clients. For example, Europe has opened up, right? So a lot of our clients and projects that we're doing are for the European market right now. And over a period of time, Indian companies are seeing that, and they're seeing value in vaccination. So therefore, they're forcing everybody within their enterprise to get vaccinated as fast as they can. And believe me, things will change. We are a very resilient species. We will figure some things out.
So, do we have any more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Pritharshv, for this inspiring speech for us budding designers. So the key takeaway messages for us were that the learning for a designer never stops, and that you should never ever underestimate the power of a good sketch. So keeping in mind these two,
Design is
we would
always
like,
good business.
sorry?
Good design is always good business.
Yes, good design is always good business. So on this note, let us end the event with a few words from our director, Professor Manisha Phadke.
Hey, hello everybody. It's a great evening and it's nice to have you, Pritharshv. I can't pronounce your
Just call
name.
me
but my
Pushkar.
student
Everybody
can.
does that.
I think Pushkar is what I call you, but it's nice to have you here. I think this 1 hour has been quite stimulating because you went through the length and breadth of brand experience design, but touching upon the intricacies of what Design Toolkit brought and will bring for tomorrow. It was also reassuring to see that what you brought to the table today is resonated in what we are trying to build in as attributes in the students. So I think the future is for these students and what you're trying to say as well. It's also interesting to know and to hear it again. I'm sure we've heard it since we started in design, that design is the center of a web of completely unconnected things, attributes, stimuli, wants and needs, and that's what makes design interesting. So I think with that, I thank you again, and I hope to see you in premises someday soon. Hopefully, as you said, if the vaccinations just go right, and we'll keep interacting. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.